Back in the day, 1 square mile would have as many as 4 different farm families on it. Now all of a sudden you have to go 4, 5, or 6 miles to find a farmer. When the farmer leaves a community, or he has no longer a purpose within that community, he not only goes himself, but he also takes the future and the potential future when he moves his family. Come on, baby.
This is Ron Martinson. He lives in Elliott, Iowa, and raises pigs from farrow to finish, or from birth to slaughter. For generations, this is what hog farming looked like in the state of Iowa. But in the last 40 years, Iowa lost 90% of its family farms. That's 40,000 farms that used to look a lot like Ron's. In those same 40 years, the number of hogs that have been raised, slaughtered, and sold has exploded, and the profits made in the hog industry in the state of Iowa has increased by 300%. You don't see that growth in the communities anymore. So where did that money go?
It used to be you drive rural Iowa and you see animals on the land. Now you don't see them, but you smell them.
Hog farms today look a lot more like this. These large metal sheds, called concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs, have taken their place. And all the profit that sustained farmers' lives went to just 3 companies that now dominate every aspect of the pork industry: Smithfield, JBS, and Tyson. We're going to talk about Tyson because their way of doing business set the standard not only in hog country, but in the entire meat industry. They control 20% of all the pork, beef, and chicken that you buy at the grocery store or get at fast food restaurants, including a lot of brands you might not even know they own. Tyson uses that monopoly power to charge you more and pay farmers less. It's profits off the back of farmers. It's pitted neighbor against neighbor. And Tyson has destroyed not just the economy of Iowa, but the ecology as well.
They're chasing the almighty dollar, but the people who have to live with their creations have to live next to their CAFOs on a daily basis.
Ron's style of farming is the same as his father's and 4 previous generations of farmers before.
We live around here with the idea that we want a pig to be a pig.
On Ron's farm, the lifestyle of a hog goes like this. Sows will gestate for about 4 months.
And that is 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days.
Then piglets are born in these small wooden pens. Piglets are weaned from their mothers and spend another few weeks in the field before they're transferred to hoop barns like these.
And they will be there until they're about 180 days of age. And at that time, they will weigh about 295 pounds, and that's when they're harvested.
When CAFO started arriving in the neighboring towns and counties, Ron and his father made the decision not to convert to the industrial model.
First off, it was a significant capital investment, but we also felt that the consequences from that decision were too restricting or too confining, not only in terms of our own financial commitment and our own financial security, but also the overall welfare of the animals.
But he watched neighboring farms shut down and farmers leave the area. Meanwhile, in Hardin County, where Nick Shute lives, the kind of operations that replaced farms like Ron's dot the landscape.
Kept waiting for these facilities to fail, but instead of failing, our way of life failed. There's not a whole lot of us left, us independent hog farmers.
Nick's a farmer too, but his operation has gotten smaller and smaller over the years. His bank tells him he's more like a hobby farmer. Now his neighbors are all industrial farms. Each CAFO houses between 2,500 and 25,000 hogs. 95% of hogs in America are raised in these facilities. But this method of farming is pretty new. It came to Iowa in the 1990s and it grew quickly. This method of meat production is sometimes called chickenization, and there's a reason. It was first pioneered by Tyson Foods in the thousands of chicken houses they controlled in the South. Don Tyson grew up working with his father, John Tyson, who had a lucrative chicken business that trucked livestock from farms to slaughterhouses in the city. When Don got older, he wanted to expand the operation.
Don Tyson is a remarkable person. Tyson Foods was a relatively large company, but Don turned it literally into a global empire during the course of his life.
The Tyson model was to own every part of the chicken supply chain. They ran feed mills, hatcheries, trucking companies, and when that wasn't enough, they opened their own slaughterhouses. The only thing they didn't own was the farm where chickens were raised and fattened. That they left to the farmer. Instead, they'd sell them the buildings and equipment and then sign a contract to sell the chickens back to Tyson. The farmer is the one who takes out a mortgage for the land, who buys and builds the barns, and who cares for the animals during their short life. This is actually the part of the process where the most can go wrong. Animals packed so tightly together can get sick. Buildings corrode, extreme weather can damage your land or animals. With so many variables, it's the farmer that takes on the most risk. For nearly a century, this vertically integrated system defined the chicken industry. But in the 1990s, hogs were chickenized.
You know, the key to chicken production is concentrating all those animals into one spot. And hogs had never been raised that way before. And so Tyson had to build these hog barns that looked like chicken barns and figure out how to pack these very large 300-pound mammals into one space and raise them in the same way they raise chickens. And one thing I really need to emphasize, they did this because there was billions of dollars on the table.
Before, hogs were known as mortgage lifters. Farmers would raise other crops and animals, but hogs were always a moneymaker because pork sold for more at the grocery store. In 1992, 97% of farmers were independent. Now 70% of all hogs are sold under contract to buyers like Tyson. By that time, Don Tyson was a billionaire, and he spent most of his time deep-sea fishing or palling around with politicians.
The core DNA of Tyson's business model is that it can go out to massive industrial-scale customers, Walmart, like the grocery chains, and it can promise them consistent high-volume products.
The Colonel's rotisserie gold.
But to do that, Tyson needs to control every element of what's happening on the farm.
Farmers invest a lot in these buildings. To start a CAFO, farmers will take out hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt for land and for structures built to Tyson's specification.
And if they don't comply, they're shit out of luck. No pun intended.
With all that debt, and with structures meant for hogs, it makes it difficult for them to leave the business or to convert to a different type of operation.
It really was a true corporate takeover. Tyson created a closed, contract-controlled system, and it destroyed the open and competitive system.
Ron is able to survive because he contracts with a specialty market called Niman Ranch, a subsidiary of Perdue, that he sells hogs to at a premium, as much as 44% above what conventional producers can get. Any hog that Ron doesn't sell to Niman, he takes to the local auction in Red Oak. The auction used to be a bustling hub for the community farmers. Now, less than 2% of hogs are sold on the open market.
There isn't another thing like this for a great distance around me. Even within the last 15, 20 years, they have gone from hog buying stations in every county to few and far between, and a lot of folks have been forced to just take them to a weekly sale barn.
You know, there's just not as many auctions around because it's a kind of a dying breed anymore. The big boys, like your confinement and your hog deals, you know, they're all more direct. There's just a lot less competition than what we used to be.
As more farmers entered contracts, the value of pork fell. But even as farmers lost income, pork prices in the grocery stores stayed about the same. That's because as the industry consolidated, Tyson was able to charge customers more and pay farmers less. And the consequences aren't only economic. Every year as the summer heats up, lakes and rivers in Iowa shut down because of health advisories. The reason kids can't swim and people can't boat anymore in these lakes is because of hog shed.
When Americans think of agriculture, they think of Iowa. What we've seen as this industrial model take hold is that just collapse.
Austin Frere grew up in Iowa and wrote the book Barons about consolidation in America's food system.
These facilities, because of the density of animals, generate massive amounts of manure.
Okay, so this map shows the rights of CAFOs in the state. Every red dot on here is a building with at least 2,500 hogs. Here it is in 1990, in 2002, in 2011, and in 2019.
So Iowa alone, there's 25 million hogs. Keep in mind, a hog defecates about 3 times more than a human being. So you're talking about the manure of 75 million people. That's the same as the population of Texas, California, and Illinois combined.
All that hog waste has to go somewhere. On a farm like Ron's, it's used to fertilize the crops that feed the hogs. The same thing is done on an industrial scale. But the problem is there's just too much hog waste.
The smell today produced by these factory farms that store the manure underneath is toxic. When they empty out the lagoon or the manure pits by my house, my dog does not even want to go outside.
Now more than half of Iowa's lakes, streams, and rivers are contaminated with cancer-causing phosphorus and nitrates like E. coli.
Algae blooms are creating the toxins in the water that's taking away the oxygen and killing the fish.
The drinking water is polluted too. The city of Des Moines spent $18 million over the last 20 years treating water that is overwhelmed by hog shed.
So you essentially have the waterways in Iowa are now an open sewer.
A lot of Iowans know this, and they're angry about it.
I believe we have a right to keep our current quality of life. It should not be diminished by someone building in our midst and then hopping in his vehicle and driving away the 9 or 10 miles to his home.
But just last year, Governor Kim Reynolds cut funding for a program that monitors nitrates in Iowa's waterways. And it's not just in Iowa. Tyson has been polluting water across the country and using their monopoly power to avoid any legal consequences. Okay, it might seem like we're covering a lot, but the reason the fish are dying in Iowa's lakes and the farmers have left the land is the same. Corporate consolidation and power have put efficiency above all else, above the air and water of Iowa, above the lives of farmers, and above the community.
For every farmer we keep on the land, we have another reason for a local grocery store to stay open. We have another reason for a local church to stay open. We have another reason for a local school to stay open. And as agriculture has gotten bigger and as agriculture has gotten more specialized, we have seen the decline. I would say we've seen the demise of the smaller farmer, and consequently we've seen the disruption and the destruction of these smaller communities that used to thrive and survive.